Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely and I talk with Sean Marston, who takes us through his incredible journey from military service to law enforcement and ultimately into the helicopter ambulance segment of the rotorcraft community. In this episode, Sean reflects on his early aspirations and the impactful experiences that shaped his career as a deputy sheriff and beyond. We'll discuss a new unit establishment he was a part of within the Harford County Sheriff's Office. Sean offers a first-hand account of the challenges, including political opposition and the eventual shutdown of the unit, alongside valuable lessons learned about proving the worth of such programs. Sean talks about becoming the chief pilot at the Martin County Sheriff's Office and the challenges and experience he had as the chief pilot, plus his insight on leadership development. We'll also have an opportunity to discuss the transition from law enforcement aviation to the helicopter or ambulance industry, as Sean was able to successfully make the transition after retiring from law enforcement in 2021 after over 21 years of service. Before we jump into the conversation, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy the Hangar Z Podcast, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review. Your feedback not only helps us improve the show, but also helps others discover our podcast. We greatly appreciate your support. Thank you to our sponsors, Precision Aviation Group, Airbus, and Onboard Systems Hoist and Winch.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
Hey, welcome to Hangar Z Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gray. I have an awesome conversation lined up for today. Someone with a ton of experience who's seen a lot of different things throughout the course of his career, including a recent transition from the law enforcement industry to the HIMSS industry. I know as folks get towards the end of their career, they're looking at potentially making a change, continuing to fly, and it seems like a natural progression for a lot of people to go from law enforcement into the HIMSS industry. So really excited to pick your brain about your career and the experiences you've had over the course of your career and that recent, I'd call it I guess somewhat recent transition.
Yeah, it's pretty recent.
Yeah. But to have this conversation is the commander, Jack Schonely. How you doing, sir?
Hello, John. John, the man that added some caption to my name recently.
I've figured out a way to hack into his titling and add the
very
commander.
nice,
for those that are watching on YouTube, you'll probably see it. But
thank you, John.
Honored to have you with us as always. Fresh out of some training that he's been a part of this last few weeks, so it'll be interesting to kind of hear some of the debrief and some things that happened as a result of the training that you were part of. And so again, our guest has a ton of experience and is taking time out of his day to join us. So Sean Marston, welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Like I said, you've got a ton of experience and, various different roles. So it'd be really cool to break that down. And I know our audience will appreciate that. Before we dig into, the later parts of your career, can you talk about, what your early interest was in aviation and law enforcement and kind of how you got to be where you are now?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Maryland in Harford County, and it's a little suburb just north of Baltimore County. And from there, I always wanted to be three things: go in the military, be a policeman, and fly helicopters. So I think a lot of that had to do with the influence of the TV shows of the 80s. Chips in particular. Yeah. Pretty ironic about here in California now, but yeah. That and the TV show Airwolf. It actually tore duty. I don't know if y'all remember that one.
Oh yeah. That's still on some of the old TV channels. You'll see tour duty stuff.
Yeah. Lieutenant Johnny McKay and his Huey helicopter.
Yeah. Huey got around.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Airwolf. That was Jan Michael Vincent, I think, right?
Yeah. It's a shame what happened to him, but yeah.
Yeah.
The coolest show as a kid, I'd come home and that was daytime TV for me when I was growing up, and I'd come home and Airwolf would be on. I'd be like, yes.
Yeah.
And those early influences are critical.
Ernest Borgnine was in that too. The McHale.
He was.
Yeah. That was one of his last things he did, I think, was Airwolf.
He was in some movies. He was in that movie, I think Red with Bruce Willis.
Oh.
He was a CIA agent. And,
yeah.
Ernest Borgnine was the crypt keeper down in the basement.
Oh, that's right.
CIA,
that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah, Airwolf was fantastic. Then you grow up and you learn about helicopters and you realize that probably would rip the rotor blades right off the thing. But cool nonetheless when you're watching. I still watch to this day. I had the DVD series.
They only sped it up 10 times the speed.
Yeah.
You see a helicopter, looks like an F-16.
Yep. Fantastic, though.
Pretty cool, though, when you look in the rearview mirror and you see, those three things, the three things that you got to accomplish, and not many people get to say that they accomplished all their goals that they had as a kid. That's awesome. Yeah,
I mean, it's a tough road. You just got to set those goals and you just have to full send and go for it if you want to do it. It's hard, but it's definitely doable if you have the right mindset and you really want to get on it. You're going to get on it.
Walk us through the early, time in your life when you joined the military and kind of what your experience was there.
Yeah, so I went in the military actually in my junior year of high school. I did the split op program. So I was 17, went to basic training down in Fort Bliss, Texas. Not so blissful, very hot, brutal, scorpions, fire ants, the whole things. And then from there, I was in the reserve for the year. Then I decided to go active duty when I got out of high school. Went to Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I was a truck mechanic. So that was my first enlistment. My only enlistment was a diesel truck mechanic, which was actually pretty good. I've had diesel trucks my whole life till I moved out here and, taught me a lot about how to fix them and do my own work on them.
Did you have any mechanical experience prior to going to the Army?
Well, me and my dad, we'd build up lawnmowers and rebuild, lawnmower engines, stuff like that, bicycles. Yeah. But always tinkering around the house doing those kind of things. It's back in the 80s,
I feel like having that mechanical aptitude is so helpful as a pilot to understand systems and all the things that go with that understanding, especially when it comes to EPs and understanding, why it is you're doing what you're doing.
That is so true. Cause I've said it before. I do light bulbs. I don't do, I have no experience in that, but my stick buddy was Mark Williams, a car guy. I mean, a real car guy. He had a garage that had lifts and he just worked on cars. That was his hobby. He had incredible cars. He got me through pilot training by being able to explain hydraulics and, all the systems, electrical. He had a different way to spin the information that helped me so much, but it was his background in car engines that helped him and helped me by him explaining things. So I can imagine that you saw that benefit you more than once, through your training, not only with diesel in the Army, but then once you started hitting helicopters, just understanding systems.
Yeah, systems, how engines work, how fuel systems work, all the things. And then I imagine, these days with this, the newer generation, knowing the electronics, for glass cockpits.
Yeah.
So that can be a transition in itself, but it's good. I like it.
Yeah, I feel like the electronic side of aviation is so advanced now. It does take someone who specializes in understanding that to be able to do all the things. You're almost more of a computer systems person than anything else, especially in aviation and law enforcement aviation, when we've got all the moving map systems talking to the camera systems and the lights and, all the different computer systems essentially we have on board. It's a mobile IT, it seems like that's a new requirement to be a maintainer. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So you go in, you get some experience as a diesel mechanic, and what happens as you get close to the later part of your Army experience?
Oh yeah. So I wanted to fly. Obviously, I wanted to do the helicopter thing. It was back in about 96, 95 is when you start doing all the things. So really, there was no guarantees. It was, we can put you to flight school, but it could be in 6 years. It could be in, a year. So no real guarantees. So I always wanted to do the police thing. I believe I called our county sheriff's office and they're like, oh, we'll be hiring, in 4 or 5 months, whatever. So I was like, I'll roll the dice, get out. And then when they open it up and for applications, I'll apply to that. And that's what I did. And, back in the day, you couldn't just go online. You had to make phone calls. You had to check the newspaper for the ad to come out. So, yeah.
I remember looking in the back of magazines. They'd have the employment ads back there and be like, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's how I found L.A. and San Diego. Yeah, it was police product news. They'd advertise in the back of Police Product News, which is now Police Magazine. But Police Product News there was always a list of 6 or 7 agencies, and most of them were California, because they were expanding. And I found, because I applied with San Diego first, and I found that ad in the back of that magazine.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's how you do it.
Yeah. None of this internet stuff.
Nope. Nothing. It's just had to do the research the hard way. Yeah,
you did.
So So I found that ad, and it was deputy sheriff, Harford County, and it was $24,003. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. That's pretty good. So
that's great.
Yeah, not really knowing it really wasn't back then until you get that first paycheck, but
it
was better than the military. So applied for that, and then back then, the process took a while. So November of '97 is when I actually got hired and started the police academy for Harford County, and that was 7 months. So we got done in June of '98, and it was back then it was like going back to basic training. We had two great DIs. I mean, you hated them then, but you love them now. Doug Rapar and Mark Junkerman. Mark's actually running a CISM thing now. He retired for critical incident stress management. So he does a pretty good business with that, and his wife out of Maryland. But yeah, they were fresh out. Doug Rapar was a Marine Corps drill instructor on Parris Island.
Ooh.
And he thought we were following the Yellow Brick Road on Parris Island. So it was it's pretty legit. I was fresh out of the Army, so I didn't think it would phase me, but it was just like, here we go again with this stuff, And then Mark, he was, I think, 82nd Airborne. He went green to gold. He was a good dude. But yeah, it was pretty rough first couple months back then. That's how they used to do the training.
Was the county agency you were working for, is that the same county that you grew up in and lived in?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
What was your experience like, working patrol and being a sheriff within the same area that you worked or that you lived in?
It was pretty good. It was a pretty big county. It's 300 some thousand people. So you really don't know too many people. And I worked on the lower end, which is more of the high crime region than like the upper end. From 95 north is a little bit less. 95 south is a little bit of the higher crime area. It runs right into Baltimore City and Baltimore County. So it was a good experience. I did, when I worked narcotics, I did end up doing a search warrant on my house that my parents owned.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
At least you need to lay out of the house.
Yeah. I was like, I still got the stove I used to hide in when I was a kid because they had a little pull-out drawer. I have a picture of me sitting in that bad boy. Yeah. It wasn't my warrant. It was one of the other detectives, and I was like, that's my house. That's where my parents used to live.
Bizarre.
For like funny. 4 years, yeah, before they moved.
When you're prepping search warrants, that was always one of the things that was difficult, was trying to anticipate what the layout of the house was inside,
Yeah.
So that's a pretty unique opportunity for you to be like, oh, I know exactly what that layout looks like. Here you go.
Yeah. Definitely interesting. That was a good one. But yeah.
I feel like a lot of folks that work and live kind of in the same community talk about some of the challenges of serving in the community you live in. The county might be different because, like you said, it's much larger geographically. But in my local community, I have a friend who grew up here, and he's a deputy sheriff. He's a sergeant up here now. And he talks about running into folks at the grocery store who he's seen on calls, and I could see that being somewhat of a challenge at times.
Yeah, I mean it happens, but pretty impartial guy. So
yeah.
Hey, how you doing? How you been?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into, as we go, the founding of the air support unit that you were part of at that sheriff's agency. But before we get there, I'd like to talk about an impactful incident or mission that you were part of. When you look back over the course of your career, you were a pilot there. You started that aviation program. You later went on to another agency and became the chief pilot, and now you're flying in the HIMS industry. So you've been in aviation for a long time. When you look back across all those experiences you've had, is there an incident that you can point back to and be like, yeah, that was probably the most memorable one that I can recall?
Probably, down in Martin County, great air support unit, great support from the admin. They really cherish what they have. So I would say, we would do a lot of proactive patrols and we would actually find a lot of crimes in progress. Not like huge crimes, but just, a good feeling. Hey, we're flying along, TFOs, scanning the neighborhoods, scanning the industrial parks. We found people breaking into cars in the middle of the night. We found people stealing mail in the middle of the night. So, those are all pretty good. Like, hey, we're up doing this. This is what it's about, really, doing your patrols at night. Really didn't do any, rescue missions. I did have one. We did go offshore, which we typically didn't go out of glide distance, but it was one of those, you get with the other TFO, like, hey, is this worth it? And, the incident it was two divers. They got lost from their boat. So the boat he was a couple miles away, just lost sight of the divers. And it was getting towards dark, if I remember right. Seas were probably 6 foot. Ooh. So, we actually went out there. It's probably about 3 miles offshore in the 58, and we actually found those divers. And that was pretty good, because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be out there in the middle of the night, because it's dark. Yeah. There's a lot of things underneath of you.
It's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack, when you're talking about the ocean. There's a lot of variables there that you have to take into account. And the Coast Guard, it's a science for them. But I'd imagine for you guys, you talked about not doing that a ton. It must have been really difficult to find them.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
I think the one diver had like a red glove on or something like that, an orange glove. So that kind of popped out when we, finally got out there. It took a little bit, though, because, the boat captain, he ended up calling in, but he gave his coordinates, and the divers, with the currents, they had just drifted. And I want to say they were probably 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the boat.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot of area to look for them.
Yeah.
And then it was the one diver. He was saying, I believe that they were spearfishing, and a bull shark came up and took his fish right off of his spear. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He cheated death twice that day.
Yeah, man.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really fun to think about those incidents that were impactful, and like you brought up, I think. For me, one of the most impactful incidents that I was a part of wasn't, what you'd consider a high-profile crime. In fact, it wasn't even a felony. It was a misdemeanor crime. We become so accustomed to being part of all the high-profile calls, the pursuits, shootings, all the things that we do. So it's funny when you consider the fact that some of the most impactful maybe weren't even felonies. The one that I'm thinking of was a adjoining city. A kid's bicycle had been stolen. And I think back to myself as a kid. That bike is everything to you as a kid. Mm-hmm. And for it to be stolen I did have my bike stolen as a kid, and it made me so mad. So
me too.
We heard the call go out, and we just happened to be close by. So we swung by, and we located someone riding a bike that looked similar to the description that was put out. And lo and behold, it ended up being the suspect and the victim's bike. Yep. So again, not a felony crime, but we were able to directly, return that bike to that kid, which was really cool. So again, not a big deal, but for me, it was really rewarding. I guess because again, going back to me as in my childhood, I had my bike stolen. So
Yeah, absolutely. Makes you feel good, doesn't it?
yeah, for sure. Jack, for you, what you've got a lot of calls to scan through. What was one of the most impactful for you?
As you're talking about it, I'm going, don't ask me this, John, because there's too many to sort through, and I can't sort through them anymore. But what comes to mind is the common theme that you both touched on. It doesn't have to be the big shootout caper, or the big incident like that. I mean, one of those does come to mind where I was over a Medal of Valor incident with a big shootout, and the canine handler that was under me happens to be Gina, my ski buddy up here in Bend, now in retirement. We both live in the same area. But I'll go with the common theme and say, not a big deal, but it had impact. And it was a purse snatch in Hollywood of a very, very attractive young lady that wants to be an actress and a model. And she is destroyed that her purse is gone. I mean, that meant everything to her. She had everything in it. And the suspect ran into a big, huge apartment building. And I was in K9, and I grabbed another K9 handler, Haggerty, and we went into the apartment building, knowing that we're probably not going to find this guy. It's huge. It's like a 4 or 5 story apartment building. Long story short, we check all the common areas, nothing. We've got nothing. And a lady comes out of an apartment and says, "Are you looking for some of these bad people?" And we're like, "Well, maybe." She goes, "Go to apartment 412. She gives us an apartment number. And we go, "Okay." So we go to 412 and we door knock it, and a female answers the door, and we say, "Hey, who else is in here?" Kind of thing. And her eyes are big. You could we're like, "Wow, we just hit the jackpot." And we go in, "We need to come in here and look." She goes, "Come on in." We find the guy with the purse in the closet.
Wow.
We come out of that apartment building, and Jim Haggerty and I are the heroes of the world to that young lady. And
Absolutely.
even the Hollywood coppers are like, "Dang, you guys are good. That dog took you right to him." Yep. Yep, they sure did. She's petting the dog, and loving every minute of it. And it was but it was rewarding. You made that person, I guarantee you, she has told that story 1,000 times more than I've told that story. Right?
Yeah.
Because it was her purse, her belongings. She was scared to death. It really frightened her. And not only do we have a guy in handcuffs, but she's got all her stuff back. I mean, it was the common theme. That's sometimes things mean more to the people we're serving than to us, because that was a nothing caper compared to some of the wild stuff, in 30 plus years. But it was rewarding, and it was nice to see her smile and not in tears. And it was successful. And Jim and I still kid about it and say, "Yep, remember that lady in that apartment?
Yeah.
She knew what was going on in that apartment building."
Yeah.
Yep.
What do they say? It's better to be lucky than good sometimes, and
I've had a lot of that.
think of all the calls that we were over.
Oh, yeah.
We're doing an area search for somebody, and an RP just calls in that happened to see something, and had that not been for that one person calling in, that person would have never been caught.
Yep.
So those are always good. But yeah, I love those types of conversations and bringing up those things, because we know we sacrifice a ton over the course of our career, and to remember the positive outcomes as a result of the things we were over sometimes is really rewarding. So thanks for sharing on that.
Yeah. Another one, really, I wouldn't say it's not even an incident. It's training the TFO of ours to become a pilot. That's probably the most rewarding thing I've done, and now he's basically running the air unit there. So
That's cool.
You take him from TFO all the way through instrument. So that was probably the proudest.
Yeah.
Not call related, but
I think that, you start to experience that as an FTO in the field, and
Yep.
you see the folks that surpassed you and now hold positions of rank that are above you. Like, good for you. That's awesome.
My brother-in-law, he's one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's a major now with Harford County, but we field trained him. I was kind of an alternate for him. It was he wasn't my brother-in-law at the time, but his primary was another guy, Ken Perry, and then I helped train because we would alternate, and then next thing you know, it's my brother-in-law. I'm like, okay, now he's a major.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is.
You know, the leadership adage of wanting to leave it better than you found it kind of comes into play here. You know, whether it's a trainee in the field or a TFO in airsport or a pilot in airsport, it's really cool to pass that knowledge on and to encourage them to do better than you do, and you did. You know, so I think that's really impactful, and a trait of a good leader, like you're talking about. That was an impactful moment for you to see that person to succeed and now, you know, they're successful. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it makes you proud. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you talked about again going back to the Army, deciding not to pursue flight school, and then going to the sheriff's office. Talk about the sheriff's office a little bit. You know, what kind of assignments are available? What kind of demographics, I guess, were within the sheriff's office, and what that looked like as a deputy?
Yeah, well, when I started in Harford County, it was smaller. There would be, I want to say we had a minimum of 8 patrol, you know, per shift. Not too many zones back then. Still, you know, 90s, it wasn't really built up as much as it had like a big boom where this county just exploded. We had, you know, normal patrol. We just had canine. And that was really about it. School policing had just come about, and community policing. So it was relatively small. It wasn't a huge sheriff's office, but it was one of the biggest in Maryland. Just wasn't very
How big
big.
geographically was the county?
Oh, let's see. I want to say it's about 500 square miles, 400 and some square miles.
Wow. They had 8 deputies to cover 500 square miles.
Yeah, back in the day, it was something else. We'd have 3 down south. You'd have 3 up north to cover the entire north end of the county, which, I mean, you know, if you're, you know, in one of those situations, you could be waiting, you know, you're fighting for 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
Were there other municipalities within the county that had police departments that you could rely on for assistance?
yeah, you had Bel Air Police Department. Which, I mean, but still for the upper end, it was still a long drive. Aberdeen Police, they'd help a lot, and Havre de Grace. So if you were in the lower end of the county, you could have, you know, Aberdeen and Havre de Grace obviously help you out.
Wow. That's a large geographic area with a small number of folks. What was LA is how many square miles, Jack, roughly?
About 460, 480, something like that.
So larger than the county, but you've got obviously a larger population of citizens in the area, but got a lot of officers as well. You know,
but the distance is what scares you. You know, like Sean said, you know, if you're waiting 10 minutes, you're in a fight, you're waiting 10 minutes. That 10 minutes is an eternity. Yeah. I used to get mad at 30 seconds and go, where were you guys? You know, 30 seconds they get there and you go, man, where are you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remembered responding to a classmate of mine, Abe Barone. Abe was killed in line of duty years later. But Abe, the first time I saw him after graduation on duty was his help call where he's in a fight. And I'm telling you, we got there I was in a neighboring division, but we got to him first. And it was within 30 seconds of the help call. And I remember getting there and his badge is ripped off his shirt. His shirt is torn. His knee is all scuffed up. I mean, he looks like he was in a fight for the past hour. And I won't say exactly what he said, but where were you guys in a very firm way was his first words. And it was 30 seconds, you know? So imagine 10, 15 minutes. And and what Sean's describing is pretty common in a lot of America. I mean, I know it is here in Oregon. Oregon's now second place from the bottom in per capita police officers. There's officers that are out there and they're on their own. And you just got to deal with it. And that's something beyond anything I ever experienced. And I admire the courage that it takes to do that. I truly do.
Yeah. The verbal judo that goes with that is a whole lot different than what we experienced in more of the urban environment.
Yep.
Yeah, the verbal judo is real. You just try and keep them talking. All right, my backup's getting close. Come on, keep talking.
That's good. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, you have
picked
to,
your
man.
battles, right? You picked your battles too. You go,
Uh-huh.
this guy's not going to jail tonight. I know he's got that warrant, but not tonight. Not where we're standing, and you choose it another time. I've heard more than one deputy in this country tell me that, where where I would ask them to go, wow, where's your nearest backup? Sonoma years ago, they had a deputy that lived at the coast. Well, his nearest backup was 30 minutes sometimes.
Yeah.
And he had a dog, a canine assigned to him that was just there to intimidate people. I mean, so that people wouldn't screw with him. But I asked him about that. And he said, oh, Jack, I can't tell you how many times I walked into a call and there's 5 people in there and I see one of the guys sitting on the sofa and I know he's got a felony warrant and for something very serious. And I went, well, y'all have a nice night. And he said, and I leave. And then I'll wait and get him tomorrow. Or I'll go down the road and wait for him to drive away by himself. I changed my whole thing. And that was foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
As an urban police officer with a partner. It was completely foreign to me. But it's common.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're by yourself, man. Stuff can go sideways really quick.
Yep, gotta be smart.
You talked about having 8 deputies assigned to a patrol shift. Would that pertain to day shift and night shift, or was it different for nights?
No, that would have been per. So we were in 8.5 hour shifts. So day shift would have that, mids would have that, and then 4 to 12 would have that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You spent a majority of your career working nights, at least your patrol career working nights from what I understand, right?
Yeah, I loved it. We had a great crew. Yeah.
It's a whole
The action is.
a whole different animal working nights as compared to days. It's busier, but man, I feel like at least graveyard, it's busy in the beginning and then it gets really hard as the night goes on because there's nothing happening and you're fighting to stay awake. That was tough.
About 4 a.m. It's fighting to stay awake for sure.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, it was good though.
You see the weirdest things during those hours when you think back to your patrol experience in particular. Anything funny that you remember that sticks out, from the 3-4 o'clock hour? Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Onboard Systems Hoist stays ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety. For more information, go to hoist-winch.onboardsystems.com.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys will think it's funny, but yeah, there's so many things. I really don't think about them too much, but I remember this one. It was I don't know. It's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, we were sitting there, we roll up, we find this dude just sitting on the side of the road, man. And he's sitting there and he's trying to light a cigarette. And he's obviously, he's just wasted. And every time he go to light the match, the guy I was working with would be like, huh? And the guy go, what? And then he go, put it back. We go, huh? And just, what? And eventually it burned his finger and he rolled over backwards down in the ditch. And I'm like, oh, man. Yeah, it's just silly stuff like that, you know. And we had this pretty good car chase. It came off, guy ran from me, and it was on Route 7. He goes ripping down 152, ends up bailing out into one of the higher crime neighborhoods at the time, and kind of like the lady you were talking about, the purse, like the neighbors are pointing to us like, he ran in this house, and so we go in the house. Where's he at? And he fell through the ceiling because he got into the attic. Didn't step on those rafters.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Whoops.
Gotta stay on the rafters.
Yeah.
Bad things happen.
Yeah. How many rafters have you been in, Jack, with a canine?
Oh my God. Well, we didn't take our dogs up, believe it or not, but we went up. And if the dog indicated high, we'd go up and go in. There are departments that put dogs up in attics all the time. They don't think anything of it. We loved our dogs. So we didn't do that. But we'd go up, which is higher risk. And Haggerty, I talked about him earlier on that caper. I watched Haggerty one day. Brian O'Hara, Haggerty, and I are in an attic. And we said, hey, I think Hag even says, hey, careful. Some of these rafters are a little shaky. And we said, Roger that. And all of a sudden he went, poof. It was like a cartoon. There was just dust there. He fell through and landed on a glass dining room table.
Oh. And
we rushed down and he's just laying there. I mean, it knocked the wind out of him. He was okay, but it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen is watching him say, hey, watch yourselves over here. He's from Boston. Watch yourselves over here. and all of a sudden there's dust there. You know, where did Haggerty go? Crash, you know. It's dangerous up there.
I hate attics. The insulation, it just doesn't, it stays
I'm
with you.
thinking about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was miserable.
Terrible.
Yeah, that stuff's great. The midnight critters that come out are something else. You know, they're the most gullible people in the world. I'm convinced. But it is funny to think back on a lot of those incidents, you know, and like you talked about the guy with the match, that kind of stuff's
funny.
hilarious.
That Ken will still talk about that one. That's just funny. And, you know, the car chases back then were real. Like,
Oh yeah.
we had a lot of car chases, and we couldn't pit, so we basically just chased them till the wheels fell off, you know, and they'd let us chase as long as we were safe, you know, and especially midnights, you know, the roads weren't very crowded or anything, but we, Ken's a character. He'd probably be funny to have on the show one day. He's not aviation, but man, I remember he gets on that radio. It's like 3 a.m. He's like, "Dispatch, I'm in pursuit of a 66 and a half Chevy Chevelle." I'm thinking,
66 and a half.
how does he know it's a 66 and a half? And me and the other guy, we had CBs, and we're like, he's full of shit, you know, because we were talking on the CB. And now, sure shit, he was. And we end up going down there. Like, you really were chasing this guy, weren't you? You know, it's just comical back then.
Well, you went on from working patrol and graveyards to finding yourself in narcotics, which
Yeah.
I never worked narcotics, but I'd imagine it was a blast. Can you talk about your experience there?
Yeah, it was good times. It was, it was a game of cat and mouse for sure. You know, I won't go into a lot of tactics because they still use that stuff, but you know, we did a lot of wiretaps back then, which, I mean, that's common knowledge. I don't know how things are now. I'm not really in that game anymore, but yeah, a lot of, we focused on mid to upper level, you know, drug dealers and narcotics. So, you know, we would work our way up the ladder, you know, and then mainly cocaine, and then it kind of cocaine and marijuana, but we would focus on like big shipments of marijuana. And then it moved into the whole pill phase, if y'all remember that, the oxycodone. So that was a big thing, people doctor shopping. And then our county borders Baltimore City, so we would go into the heroin game when the pills, I guess, were getting harder to get. And you would have one person would go down to the city. They'd buy like, you know, 100, 200 caps of heroin. They'd bring them back, and they would sell them in our county. So, you know, we focused a lot on that back then.
The game of cat and mouse you brought up was what I loved in patrol, you know, looking for dope and narcotics on vehicle stops and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought that was really fun. And, you know, the folks that I worked with patrol, when they end up going to narcotics, the first thing you'd see them do is either grow a beard or a mullet or both. So what was your go-to hairstyle for narcotics?
Kind of what it looks like now, but just not gray.
Okay.
Yeah. And a goatee. Had a goatee.
Yeah.
All right.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course.
Have to do something like that.
Because the greatest thing is you didn't have to shave every day, because I was really tired of shaving. It's kind of what I like now. I don't, you know, I use a trimmer. I don't have to shave with the razor and the shaving cream every day. You know, doing that your whole life from the Army all the way through police land. But yeah, it was the goatee. The mullets were, they were phased out. Now the generation of narcs before me, you should see some of those pictures.
Yeah.
It's mullet city.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty funny. But
Well,
yeah.
it's funny because my kids, they're 13 and 14, and I've seen mullets have come back. So a lot of their friends have mullets, and I'm like, you're going to regret that. I know from experience, you're going to regret that.
Yes, you will. Yeah. The shorty long back.
Jack, remind us in your UC experience, what was your hair of choice?
In Vice, I just let it get long, and it was curly, like Peter Frampton curly, Jim Morrison curly, kind of in long. So I just let it go long. But and then in Pennsylvania, that year and 3 months that I was with Bureau of Narcotics, I grew a mustache for the only time in my life, and it wasn't a good one. And I realized I'd look in the mirror and go, "That's why I've never done this. It doesn't look good." You know, but and I let my hair get longer there.
Yeah.
A little bit of mullet going maybe, dopers like mullets.
Yeah,
I had to fit in with these dopers in Pennsylvania. They're an interesting group.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is pursuit. Visit contest.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the buzzword.
Well, we did have this good one. It just sticks out. So we used to drive around at night, and look for drugs because back then they still had the open air. You find guys on the corners doing whatever they're doing, and you get beat sometimes. They take your money, you never see them again. You had the buy money. But I remember I was with one of my other guys. He's still in there, so I'm not going to say his name right now. Still to this day, still working narcotics, and we're in the car. It was my Chevy Trailblazer in my UC car. And this guy hops in, and we're like, "Yeah, man, you get a 40 rock." He's like, "Yeah, I got you. So we're like, "Man, you're gonna beat us for this money. We're never gonna see you again." He's like, "Nah, man, I got you." He takes his teeth out, sets on the seat. I'm looking. I'm like, "This guy really just take his dentures out and he left them in the car?" I was like, "This is an honest drug dealer."
Yeah.
Right. He left him there. He went, he got us our stuff and came back and collected his teeth and moved on with life.
Story. That's really good.
It's just me and the other guy sitting there laughing. We're like, "Oh my God."
Yep.
Too much.
That's some collateral
That
for
is
sure.
really funny.
Yeah, collateral, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that world is a different world for sure. But when you think back to your career plans, ambitions you had, I'd imagine aviation was something that you wanted to do, and your department didn't have an aviation program. Can you talk about your ambition to become a pilot and how you merged that with where you worked with the sheriffs and how you grew an aviation unit within your sheriff's department?
Yeah, well, I knew, our county was growing. We always had a need for aviation because, a lot of it searches. It was rural, a lot of vehicle chases. And the only thing we had, we could call Baltimore County, which obviously they ran a single, they were still in their Jet Rangers back then, maybe. Then they went to the A-Stars in about 2005 or 6, somewhere around there. But, we always needed the aviation. So we had the option of Baltimore County, which who knows if they're busy. They have a bigger county and a lot more stuff to deal with than we did. Or the Maryland State Police. So, the Maryland State Police are coming. The closest one was coming out of Martin State Airport. But they were in the Dauphines end. So you'd have a 20 to 30 minute response time before they even got there, which, as you all know, that's an eternity, when a guy's on the run or things are going down. So, I always knew we had the need for it. I just didn't really know how to get it started until I started doing, the research for the whole thing. And about 2008, I was still in narcotics, and I started looking into it. I went to the ALEA conference on my own dime, started getting into that world and just investigating, seeing how things went. Made contacts down with Baltimore County PD, Shannon Mack in Anne Arundel County. He really, helped out just kind of with the ins and outs of how everything goes. So I put, the proposals together, broke down, the studies. A lot of it did come from ALEA at the time. Now it's APSCON. Cost analysis, how much would it cost to buy new? How much, I found out about the 1033 program. How much does it cost to operate a Jet Ranger or 58? Basically put all those numbers together, and I had them for a long time. And you just have to get that right backing, And finally, I got the right backing and, commanders that supported it. Because you have to have someone with rank above you who's like, yeah, we need this. Because you're going to a sheriff, and, a sheriff is independent from the county executive. They run their own show. So it's their budget. They really don't have to get, to my knowledge, approval from a county exec how to run their own budget. So they're going to get X amount of dollars and they can do what they want with it. So yeah, getting that right support. I got at the time, Lieutenant Lee Dunbar. He really helped get the whole thing off the ground when we eventually got it going, and Captain Dwayne Williams and Major Doug Versey. So, they really helped and saw the need for it, as a lot of people there did. And getting it past the sheriff to approve it at the time was a whole nother hurdle. So, yeah.
People talk about funding and politics are the two roadblocks that often prevent you from having an aviation program. So you talk about doing the research to justify the existence of a program. There's all kinds of data out there. Like you talked about getting data from ALEA at the time. When you think back over the data that you collected and the presentation that you presented, what were some of the things that were most impactful when it came to your own leadership that was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And this is why we want to pursue it type?
I would say, the reduction in crime, the how it can help reduce the crime just by proactive patrols, how crime went down. The apprehension rates, they went up a lot when you had, the aircraft overhead. And, really, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, to run a 58 is pennies when it comes to, $100 million budget overall for the sheriff's office.
Walk us through the approval process. You present what your findings. They say, I'd like to pursue this. What happens after that for you and your experience?
Well, you get pushed back from some deputies because they think it's going to impact a pay raise, which it doesn't. But, obviously some think that. I went to the union, talked about that, got a lot of support from a lot of people there. And I actually put out a survey, like a poll thing that would go out to everybody, and it came back overwhelmingly that, people were in support of it. So, the admin sees that and they take that into consideration. And I think it was, it was the Captain Lee and the major, behind closed doors that really helped convince the sheriff at the time, hey, why not give it a shot? Let's, see how it does. We actually funded it off seized drug proceeds, which we had a lot of it back in the day. It was seizing a lot of money from these big cases we worked. So that worked out really well.
You bring up something that's interesting, and I really hadn't considered it as a major obstacle. We talk about the political obstacles that exist, but our own internal unions, our associations, oftentimes, like you said, can prevent or present a barrier and an obstacle politically to overcome. So I think what you did was wise, coming up with a proposal and talking to those folks, a survey that helped kind of outline what you want. Because you're right. I think ultimately you have to sell it to your own deputies and officers first, right? Like if the union is not going to buy off on it, if they're going to fight it, unfortunately the unions have a lot of power, at least in California, to stop projects dead in their tracks, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality.
Yeah.
I think that's really wise. And again, something I hadn't really considered. Change is difficult for law enforcement. That saying about police officers, they hate change, but they hate the way it is as well. Something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you're gonna have the old salty dogs who are in the back of the room that I don't want anything new or different. But it's such an advantage for the patrol officers, for anybody really.
It's huge
when it comes to safety. Apprehension rates, all the things that we talk about, time savings. To cancel these calls for deputies don't have to drive for 40 minutes across the county to check for whatever the call is.
And we would do that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jack, I know, LAPD is a big union and a big presence there. Did you have a lot of support internally from the union or the association as it pertained to aviation?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Yes and no. I mean, there was times when they would help enhance the pay. They helped on that project. But other than that, the union really wasn't involved with air support in any way. It came down to, was the chief happy? Was the command happy with that unit. And the unit performed so spectacularly every single day and absolutely saved lives and resulted in higher apprehension rates and lower crime and things like that, that the folks on the ground would have rebelled if you said, we're getting rid of that. You know, it would have been the patrol officers that would have been screaming, not necessarily the union, but the union members would not have tolerated that nonsense.
Yeah.
Because it was so established. I mean, my whole time, it came on in 83, my whole time was that unit was very well established already when I came on the job. And for my whole 31 plus years, it was like, it's just part of the culture of the department. It became a necessity, not a something that was, this is a luxury. Without it, people would be hurting. It was the first thing they asked for. Yeah, they asked for it. It was the first thing you'd hear somebody say, get them an air unit, requesting a backup and an airship. That was just common language that just came out. Most departments have to go through a long struggle to get to that point. Like Sean's talking about. It didn't start that way, did it, Sean? You have to convince people that this is a good idea, and convince even the deputies that you're supporting that they need to use you and how to use you. I'm sure we're going to get to some of that, but when you came in, my situation when I was spoiled rotten, came into a department and a unit that was well established. It was part of the culture, and that's it. And when I worked canine, I talked to canine handlers all the time. I said, I had a helicopter over me 98% of the time on every canine search. Spoiled. But it kept me safer.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. It kept me safer. And
the aerial advantage you have when that, TFO is looking through that West Cam or FLIR or whatever.
Yeah.
It can't be beat.
Yeah.
And the safety aspect is huge. So
you can't talk about the safety aspect enough for both officers and citizens. It's
100%.
everybody that you're over is safer because of that aircraft. And some recognize it. Most are, really? And some dispute that and say, absolutely not. Just makes noise. They're ignorant. They don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't even pay attention to those anymore.
Yeah, the sheriffs, obviously they're elected, so they worry about the political kickback from the citizens and, all those things. So I actually went and to appeal. Some sheriffs, they have egos. They're the top dog. I went and had a model built of a Jet Ranger. This is what you could have in your county. So picture this right here.
Wow.
And it's only going to cost X, Y, Z. It is not a lot of money, in the grand scheme of things. And what you get, the cost versus reward is incredible.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. A friend of ours, Brad, he's in Oklahoma, and he's done the same thing, gotten mock-ups created for his agency and using those to show, like you said, the command staff, like, oh, that looks pretty cool. They like shiny new things, and that's a shiny new thing, so that's a great way to kind of overcome some of those obstacles politically when it comes to, showing the command staff exactly what your vision is for the unit. You talk, Jack and Sean, you both brought up the citizens. When your unit became a real thing, what was the feedback that you got from the citizens initially? Was there pushback, because of the noise and what was happening, or were they accepting of the program?
No, I think overall they were accepting. Really didn't have like all the. Social media was there, but it wasn't like it is now. So, I never heard anything really negative about it from the citizens about noise or anything like that. So, I would say, of the static events that we did, because I always thought that was huge. We need to get this thing out there, community events, and like tell people what we can do, how much it costs. And it was always positive. There was nothing negative when I would do those static events.
Yeah, those events I think are huge, for a multitude of reasons. One of which is recruitment of new officers. That's a big deal. But the other part is, like you said, having the citizens up close and personal with not just the aircraft, but the aircrew. They look up and see a helicopter flying overhead. They'd be like, oh, there's Sean. He's a pilot. Like that makes a difference,
Yeah.
So I think that community engagement is really important for them to understand exactly where their tax revenue is going. That's really important. You brought up social media, and then he's gonna laugh because I talk about it all the time. We don't necessarily need these static events all the time to do this. We have a tool at our disposal every day. It's underutilized in social media, and I think for a long time, agencies have been afraid to hand us the keys to social media, and I get it. There's strategies involved in how we market our agency and the things that we talk about. But I think if the officers that are tasked with social media promotion of an aviation unit, for example, understand those guidelines, I don't think there's a more powerful tool and a more cost-efficient way to show the citizens that we work for what they're investing in and what they're getting as a return on their investment, because it's huge, But outside of that, the static displays are a big part of that. So I'd love that you guys are doing that.
Yeah.
But any feedback on the social media side?
Oh, no. I mean, back then I want to say that they were just starting to use, the Facebook thing. So it was really, hey, Air One's up doing this. And, I didn't pay attention. I didn't even have Facebook back then. So I didn't get it till like 2017 or something like that. Just never paid no attention to it. So,
well, it's interesting because it shows how much things have changed, right? The way people consume content, the way they consume the news. Newspapers hardly exist anymore. You don't see people sitting in a chair with a paper folded over their face anymore. A lot of times now you see people with their phone out and they're scrolling the news there, or they're on social media consuming news there. So it's interesting how that changes. But I think it's important for us, in the public service industry, to understand that and respond accordingly. Again, going back to recruitment, young folks, that's where they're gonna be inspired. The days of Airwolf and Cops and those things are pretty much gone, unfortunately.
They are.
And I love Cops. It's such a great show, and it did so many great things for our community and the recruitment side of things. And I actually think it's coming back.
It is
Yeah,
back.
Cops is
It's on Fox
Cops is
TV.
back.
Yeah.
Fox Nation has new episodes.
Yeah.
But that was a big source of recruitment for us, But again, I think the newer generation, my kids would rather sit down and watch YouTube and well, they don't have social media, but kids in general would look at social media. They'd rather do that than sit in front of a TV and watch TV, which is odd, right?
Yeah,
because I didn't grow up like that. So interesting. I just think we're missing the mark as a general community when it comes to the application of social media. But I'll get off my soapbox and come back to you on the unit that you launched. Can you talk about the successes you had with that unit, and then ultimately what happened with the program?
Yeah, so we got about 2012. The sheriff at the time, he gave us the approval to get the aircraft. And what we did was we ended up finding a 58 Alpha Plus model through the 1033 program that was down in Montgomery County PD. So this aircraft was previously operated by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Natural One. Then their unit got, cut for political reasons then too. Went to Montgomery County. They never used it, so it was basically in mothballs. So our captain talked to their captain and basically was like, it's not going to happen for us. So they were like, yep, we'll transfer it over. We did the paperwork through the state. We brought it up to Horizon Helicopters in Newark, Delaware. That's actually where I did my flight training. And, they were our contract and maintenance guys at the time. So, they went through the whole thing and, we got it up and running through inspection, had it repainted, for our colors. It was blue and silver. And we did all the policies, wrote the operating manuals, and not reinventing the wheel. I think I got the meat and potatoes of it from Anne Arundel County, because I was trying to base it on a county. It's like kind of our size and kind of our operation. They ran a 58 and a 407 at the time. Baltimore County is a little bit bigger, but so kind of just put it in terms of something that was our size. And then we went to, right after that we went active with it. So yeah, it worked out pretty good.
Once you guys launched the program, were you guys a 5-day a week or a 7-day a week operation? What did that look like?
So we had myself to fly it, and we had Lieutenant Charlie Carr at the time. He's now retired too. He was a former AH-1 guy in the military. So we had, 2 pilots for the sheriff's office. We had to use, because they wouldn't dedicate personnel to it. So it was actually run kind of as a part-time thing. I was full-time, basically, but I was still under narcotics. So it was kind of working like in that little envelope, but we would still go do patrol calls. We flew out of Forest Hill Industrial Air Park in a rented hangar. We bought a 500-gallon fuel trailer for the Jet A. And then our TFO program we had all part-time TFOs, which it's hard itself, to have all part-time guys. We did end up kind of having one guy pretty much full-time, Vinny Denardi. He was in special operations at the time. So the captain over that unit, he was pretty understanding. He supported the program. So he pretty much anytime, we needed TFO, Vinny could be up there and he could help do the day-to-day. And another guy, Jim Markley, we had him there as well. He is also an A&P in the military. So that helped, with the smaller things. We have to do the 50-hour inspection, stuff like that, and you lube the thing. Not really with the bigger inspections, but it was still good to have, his knowledge there. So we had, 2 pilots. We had an A&P there. We used a contracted A&P out of the military because we're right near Edgewood Arsenal, Aberdeen Proving Ground, and flew a lot with him during counter drug stuff and narcotics. So he would come up and, we would pay him contract maintenance on the side, for like the 100-hour inspections. So we had a lot of good assets in place, for a basically newborn air unit. And then we would just self-dispatch, or we would get calls and we would just run it out of that hangar and, hey, we would hear something come out on the radio and we would respond to it. And we were using a FLIR 7500 Bravo model. Yeah, not the greatest, but it worked. It got it done. So, yeah.
What you're describing, I think, describes a lot of aviation programs across the country. Not every agency has the funding and resources to staff a program full time or to have the newest equipment. But what you're describing is important because we got to look at the resources at hand and how do we create an effective and efficient program based on those. Whether you're using binoculars or an old Bravo 7500, the fact that you're up working these calls is helpful for the citizens and the folks on the ground. Yeah. When you think about some of those early successes, any calls or incidents that comes to mind that were, kind of a proof of concept for you that showed your command staff, hey, this is really worthwhile. This is why. Hey, thanks again for joining us for this engaging 2-part series of the Hangar Z podcast with Sean Marston. And what an honor and a privilege it was to talk to Sean and highlight his career. What a unique transition he's had from law enforcement to the HIMS industry, and what he's doing there is amazing. So we've talked a lot about some unique closings in the past, and for today's recording, we have a very unique opportunity to talk to Sean to kind of wrap the conversation up. So Sean, welcome back. If you could just walk us through some of the closing points you'd like to leave for the audience.
Yeah, I'd just like to circle back to Reach and GMR and give them a shout out. One of the things I liked about Reach was that they tried to take care of me, moving across country, the whole making sure my home life was good. They helped accommodate my schedule because it's 7 on, 7 off, align it with my wife and everything. So that's a big thing, especially in this industry where you're gone for 7 days. Because had it been different, then we would be on completely opposite schedules. So if anybody has any questions about going into EMS from law enforcement, because it is an entirely different type of work, different dynamic, feel free to hit me up, reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can hit me up on my C2C Instagram is C2C_helicopter. It's on Instagram. And we can talk about anything you may have. I also like to just say, if there's anybody out there who's looking for advice in the law enforcement path, for aviation, for pilots, feel free to give me a shout out there. Any kind of consulting work, anything like that. I'm always here. You can message me and we can have a talk about it. Any funding sources too. I'm sure a lot of things have changed over the years, but there are some kind of grants out there for equipment, for aircraft, things like that you can research and find those things. So that's pretty much about it.
The networking side of things is huge. I highly encourage you to reach out to Sean if you're considering a transition from law enforcement to HIMS or just to HIMS in general. You might have folks in the military segment right now that are looking to transition from there to the HIMS industry. I'm sure Sean will have a lot of information for you. I know there's always rotating positions available within the network that you work, Sean. So I'm sure folks can reach out to you. You might have some advice, might be able to point them in the direction of a person within your company that could highlight what positions are currently open and what they might qualify for based on their experience.
Yeah, so we do have currently an opening at Reach 80 Williams. It's the fire base as well as EMS, like we talked about earlier. So if you go to, I believe it's Careers GMR, and you just type in the location or helicopter pilot, you can see all the listings. People just do need to realize that sometimes they do go out internally first. So while you may see it there, it is going to be open internally for people already working within the company. Same thing kind of as law enforcement,
Yeah. Again, the networking's huge. Thank you, Sean, for your willingness to help folks out. We talk about mentorship a lot, and this is a huge opportunity for folks that are looking for some inside information on a movement and positions that might be available. So thank you for your willingness to do that. Thank you to everyone who's listening to the Hangar Z podcast. If you could do us a huge favor, like and subscribe on the platform you use to listen to the Hangar Z podcast. It helps us out tremendously. Again, thank you to all of our guests like Sean. You guys have made this show what it is. Without your willingness to join us and talk about your career and the things that have impacted you, we wouldn't have much of a podcast here. So thank you very much, Sean. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, we'll catch you later.
Thank you, John. It's been great.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information. Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Onboard Systems Hoist stays ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety. For more information, go to hoist-winch.onboardsystems.com.